We begin with big breaking news out of New York. A jury has reached verdicts on multiple charges against Sean Diddy Combs. The world has been watching this federal criminal trial with alleged sex crimes and crimes of racketeering, trafficking. We now know the music mogul has been found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he has been acquitted on 3 more serious charges, 2 counts of sex trafficking and 1 count of racketeering conspiracy. The CBC Jennifer Yoon is outside that courthouse in New York City. She was inside as that verdict was being read. Tell us what the mood of the court was like.
Yeah, it was electric. You could hear the gasps as the jury read each of those counts. And as you said, all but 2 counts he has been acquitted of. And the ones that he is found guilty of, that is transportation to engage in prostitution for both Sandra Ventura, his former long-term ex-girlfriend, and a woman known as Jane.
And Jennifer, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know we have been waiting for lawyers to speak, and it appears the lawyer for the complainant, Cassie Ventura, is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
Doug Wigdor, W-I-G-D-O-R. Well, each is faces up to 10 years on each. I'm not sure what the sentencing guidelines are given the various different things, but I'll leave that up to the government and the defense to argue. But I feel confident in saying he still faces substantial incarceration.
How will you feel if he walks out on bail?
Well, that's up to the judge. I don't have a personal vested interest in this case. Whatever the appropriate thing to do under the law is what should be done. And at the end of the day, he needs to be sentenced pursuant to the guidelines and pursuant to what the law is. My understanding of that is that he faces significant incarceration. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were listening there to Doug Wigdor. He is the lawyer for complainant Cassie Ventura. And of course, when we were talking about the verdict that has been reached by jurors, the jury returned a guilty verdict on 2 counts, both of transportation to engage in prostitution relating to Cassie Ventura. He was asked about whether or not Sean Diddy Combs will be released on a $1 million bond, a decision that is currently pending. He has been detained since September and behind bars as the trial continued. I do want to make note of a statement that Wigdor had also issued, and I'm reading it here on media reports, saying the entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November of 2023. So this is just some of the reaction that we are seeing come in now. As we know, those verdicts just came out within the last hour. And I do want to head back now to our reporter, Jennifer Yoon, who was in the courtroom. And I'm so sorry to have interrupted you. It may happen again as we continue to wait for more news from lawyers. But please take us back inside the courtroom and the reaction when that verdict was read.
Absolutely. The courtroom was electric. People were gasping as each charge, the guilty, not guilty verdicts, were being read. Now, Sean Diddy Combs was looking at the jurors. He was even making prayer hands, nodding at them. I saw him mouth, "Thank you." And it was really a moment where everyone had been kind of bracing for this. And in fact, it was kind of surprising that it came back so quickly, because we had heard just yesterday, hours before the deliberation, that they were deadlocked on this racketeering charge, this complicated charge. Now that he's been found not guilty of that, that's the most serious charge in terms of time in prison that he could serve. That could have put him away for the rest of his life. Now he's facing a maximum of 20 years. If he had been found guilty of sex trafficking as well, it would have been a maximum of 15. But this is really the least serious of the charges that he's been convicted of. Lots of evidence, text messages, screenshots, like lots of physical proof there. So it's not necessarily unexpected, perhaps unexpected how quickly this happened.
And of course, important to state here, and we can't understate just how much interest there has been in this trial internationally because of how large of a star Sean Diddy Combs is, and how many years it's alleged that these crimes continued for. And certainly for this 55-year-old music mogul, this will mean a major shift in his influence and, of course, in his ongoing career and the continued continuation of that. We know that there were 34 witnesses over the course of the 2 months that this trial went on for. There are still decisions to be made, including the sentencing. But what happens next following today's verdict? There are still some questions.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on that, what you just said about lasting influence, because throughout the trial, he may have been acquitted of racketeering charges, he may have been acquitted of sexual trafficking charges, but one thing that the trial made really clear was that there was a violent pattern of behavior that was there, and that's something that the defense has admitted throughout this entire situation. It's just that the statute of limitations has run out, and the prosecution can't go after Sean Diddy Combs for violent charges like domestic violence at this point. What happens next? We find out just how long Sean Diddy Combs will be in jail for. As I said, a maximum of 20 years. The defense and the prosecutors are in there duking it out right now. They're writing notes to the judge. The prosecution wants him to walk free right now with $1 million bail. His chartered flight is currently in Maui. He would surrender his passport. The prosecution says we need to establish that he's not a flight risk, and also that he is, they think that he shouldn't go free because of that long pattern that you described, that long period that the trial describes, because they say they don't know if he might leave and engage in the exact same behavior. Well, the defense says to that, he'd be a fool to do that. He just got his life back. He was facing life in prison. Why would he jeopardize that? So we'll find out at 1 p.m. what the proposal from both parties are. The judge will likely look at it and discuss it, and we should have an update later this afternoon, Arthi.
Thanks for this, Jennifer. So just to recap there, of course, 1 p.m. Eastern time, there may be more developments to do with whether or not Sean Diddy Combs will remain behind bars after being found guilty on 2 of the 5 counts that he was facing. Thanks for this, Jennifer. That is the CBC's Jennifer Yoon in New York. We do want to continue our coverage on this major breaking story today. And for more, we are joined now by Alexandra Stolpen. She is a lawyer at the Motley Rice Law Firm and joins us now from Philadelphia. Thanks for making time for us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Arthi.
And I first also want to flag to you and to our viewers that we are continuing to watch outside of the courthouse, and we may be hearing from the defense team and prosecution team. If that happens, we will take our viewers there. But first, Alexandra, I do want to start by getting your reaction to this verdict. Guilty on 2 counts, but acquitted of 3 others.
As an attorney who represents survivors, I find this verdict to be disappointing. I think it's interesting that the jury was able to find that Mr. Combs engaged in the transportation for prostitution, but was not convicted of sex trafficking. In order to have a felony commercial sex act, transportation is inherently part of that mens rea. So to me, that's disappointing. The RICO charge is not as surprising to me. I think when we think of RICO charges or racketeering, we all have this idea of Al Capone gangsters or bad politicians. And I think that the law in 2025 has not really caught up to the breadth and depth of poor behavior that Sean Diddy Combs engaged in.
So when we're talking specifically about what he has been acquitted of, when we're talking about racketeering, conspiracy, do you think that there is any chance of being retried on those counts?
Arthi, sadly, I don't think the prosecution will go forward with a retrial. Unlike the Karen Reed trial, which I think we all just saw play out in Boston, where there was a hung jury, in this case, there was a partial verdict. So while the prosecution has the opportunity to retry Mr. Combs, I don't think that they would do so because this is considered a good outcome under the law to even have a partial verdict.
And for our viewers, a reminder, too, of what we're covering this hour, and that is the breaking news. Sean Diddy Combs found guilty of 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution, although he was acquitted on 3 other charges that would have more serious consequences. In this, Alexandra, what happens next? We know we are waiting to see whether or not he could be released on a $1 million bond pending sentencing. What do you make of that?
For me, the thing that's most concerning is the fact that he is a private jet waiting to take him to Maui. Yes, Mr. Combs acknowledged that he was going to surrender his passport and that he would not be a, quote, flight risk. But this is a man who has unlimited resources, as we've seen, as evidenced by the fact that he was able to keep this enterprise secret and going for as long as it was. And more often than not, we have to remember that Mr. Combs is currently incarcerated and his petition for bail has been denied numerous times. The reason that his petition for bail was denied was because he was considered a threat to the safety of the community and there was a threat of witness tampering. Now, while the trial is over and the threat of witness tampering may or may not be absolved, I, again, as someone who represents sexual abuse survivors for a living, would be incredibly disappointed to see that a man who his own defense attorneys have acknowledged his aberrant behavior and his violent behavior towards women would be released unto society.
Now, part of course, what is being discussed right now is whether or not he would be released, but also we're waiting for sentencing. So that release would be pending sentencing. What do you think might come in terms of a sentence? We've seen that for the crimes that he is convicted of, it could be as many as 20 years. What do you expect?
Arthi, my hope is that he will get the maximum penalty. This is a man who was facing potentially the rest of his life in prison. And based upon the jury's verdict, which they clearly delivered thoughtfully after weighing all the evidence and the credibility of the witnesses, they determined he was found guilty of 2 of the acts. The 20 years, I think, sends a message to Mr. Combs that his behavior towards women in the community was not acceptable. But again, we have to wait and see what arguments the prosecution comes up in with the defense and what the judge ultimately allow. My suspicion is that he will not get the full 20 years.
I wanted to ask for the long-term impact as well, even though we are right now just digesting that breaking news. But we have also heard from the lawyer for Cassie Ventura, who was really the star witness in this federal criminal trial involving the celebrity music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. And the lawyer specifically said that the entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file a civil complaint back in November of 2023. And although the jury did not find Combs guilty of sex trafficking Cassie beyond a reasonable doubt, she paved the way for a jury to find him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. And he went on to say that this case proved that change is long overdue and will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. What do you make of that statement from Cassie Ventura's lawyer?
I agree with Ms. Ventura's lawyer. Regardless of the verdict here and regardless of the outcome the prosecution was hoping for or the public was even hoping for, Mr. Combs is going to be facing multiple civil lawsuits, and ultimately that could be a harsher penalty to him. Many of these were filed under the New York Survivors Act, which temporarily lifted the statute of limitations for sexual abuse claims. And when you go into civil court, we are not looking for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The threshold for proof and the burden of proof is inherently going to be lower because the plaintiffs only need to prove their claims by preponderance of the evidence, which means it's more likely than not the abuse occurred. If Combs is convicted, which he already was, on these 2 charges, the conviction of even 1 count could be used to show a pattern of misconduct or bolster credibility. For me specifically, whenever I have a civil case involving my clients, I always prefer there to be a criminal conviction because it does show that the conduct happened and that a jury of their peers agreed.
Alexandra, I want to thank you for your thoughts on this today as we continue to cover this breaking news. That is Alexandra Stolpen. She is a lawyer at Motley Rice Law Firm. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthi.